Hi there, we're here today with Dingobass to have a look at Dingotone. When it comes to finishing your guitar, there's so many options available to you. You can use a 2-pack, you can use a spray acrylic paint and then a top gloss coat, or you can use what we know as a stain, and there's a few on the market. Now Dingobass, you've developed Dingotone over 12 months. What's the real philosophy behind the product?
Well, I have a real natural aversion to chemicals and such.
Okay, yes.
So, and of course, everything you buy down the street is full of chemicals. So I thought, right, we need to make a user-friendly product which dads can sit down with their kids and build and finish guitars with some sense of ease, knowing they're not exposing their children to terrible chemicals, etc.
Yeah.
And also, keeping in mind that a lot of guys who are building don't have a man cave to build in.
Yeah.
They're building on the kitchen bench. So using natural products, it makes it a lot more wife friendly as well.
Exactly, so you can use it anywhere basically.
Basically,
the spray acrylics, and especially the 2-packs are really kind of noxious.
Some of those are quite dangerous, yeah.
So you can really notice when you open a bottle of Dingotone, it's got that nice citrusy smell.
That's right.
And there's no harsh chemicals behind it. Thanks, Dingobass. So we've heard a little bit about the philosophy behind Dingotone. Let's see how it's applied and some of the tips from Dingobass himself on applying Dingotone to your guitar. What's the first step, Dingobass, before we actually get started?
Sanding.
And sanding?
And more sanding.
And then when you think you're done?
You sand it again, and when you're tired of sanding, give it to your wife to sand.
There you go.
That's it.
Sanding is the key. And the other thing, DB, you were saying before is take your time.
Oh, definitely. You can't rush any finish. You get your stuff down the street, your rattle cans, etc., and they'll all say dry within 24 hours. Well, that's actually not true.
It might look dry on the surface.
And it'll feel dry, but underneath that skin that's formed on the top, it'll still be wet. And this is where a lot of guys come unstuck, and especially on timber, they'll think, oh great, it's dry. Give it a bit of a sand back or a bit of a steel wool back, spray again, and they wonder why they get bubbling, crazing, a milky effect. There's a whole plethora of problems that can occur. And generally speaking, it takes really 2 weeks for each coat to dry and cure properly before you should go back in over the top.
Alright. So we repeat, take your time.
It's very important.
Alright. Well, let's get the camera in, DB, and we'll have a look at how we actually use Dingotone.
Sure.
So Dingobass, this looks like a body from an LP1M kit. It's got the mahogany body there with a flame maple veneer on top.
Yes.
So how have you prepared this before applying Dingotone?
Okay, I've basically, and with all Dingotone products, I sand down to 400 grit. You can see this here. Remembering when you're sanding to always sand with the grain. Flamed timbers can be a little bit deceiving. You might get the impression that the grain's actually running this way, where in actual fact it is running this way.
Yeah, and hopefully that shows up on the camera, but you can actually see that, running north-south.
Yes, so yes, you just keep sanding away until, and you hold it in the light so you can get good light bouncing off, and then get down the angle that's right so you can see across the body, and you'll pick up if there's any scratches or things that you've missed.
Alright, so sanding down to 400, then just wipe it off and make sure it's clean.
That's right. I have a wonderful brush. This is actually a paper hangers brush, and I just give it a bit of a dust. Don't use methylated spirits or turpentine or anything like that to wipe your body down. You may run a risk of actually lifting the veneer if you're not careful. I have actually had that happen, and that's a bit of a drama to fix, but just a brush, or even wipe it down with your 100% cotton t-shirt material.
Yep.
Just to get rid of the dust.
Great. So Dingobass, with the Dingotone kits, I noticed there's 3 bottles in the kit. You've got your stain coat, your intensifying coat, and your final top coat.
That's right.
So with the stain coat, what are the tips and tricks for putting the first stain coat on?
Well, it's entirely up to the user as to how much they put on. If the more you put on, the deeper the colour you're going to get. And the beauty of this formulation is that you don't have to wait for it to dry before you reapply. You can just keep applying until you're satisfied you've got the depth you want, and then you put it aside and let it dry for 3 to 4 days is usually enough if the temperature is over 25 degrees Celsius.
Right, and what about humidity? Does that affect the drying? Or?
Not that I have experienced yet, but if it's cool and humid, yes, it will affect it. So It's always best to try and hang your guitar in a warm, well-ventilated area.
Right. So DB, let's have a go at applying the first stain coat. What have we got here? Is that the Carragini red?
This is Carragini red.
Nice.
Yes. And as you can, well, you can't really see in the bottle, but it is a very, very deep red. Now what I like to do is the bottom of a yogurt pot is really good size. Let's push that aside. So you get your bottle and you give it a good shake for at least 30 seconds. I've already pre-shaken this one, so we don't need to go over that again. Pour out about a third of the bottle and put the lid back on. Always a good thing to do is to keep them sealed for as long as you can. When you first receive your Dingotone, it has been gassed, so there's no air in the actual bottle. So its shelf life should be about 6 months. That's after you've opened it. Always wear the nitrile gloves. There will be gloves in each kit that you purchase, and you can purchase more from the Pitbull site. Now with your cotton cloth, I like to cut it into little squares this size. And then what I do is I just bundle it up like such, get it in there and really soak it up, and then squeeze the excess out. Next step, you should get your body, and you can apply it any hole. How you can go that way or you can go circular. I like to go circular, so you're really pushing that colour down into the timber. And you just keep going. And one of the other things that we've discovered with Dingotone is sometimes you'll see when you lift off and you re-soak your rag, it's like a tide mark will come up. But the great thing with Dingotone is that tide mark disappears pretty well much straight away, and you'll get a really nice blend of colour happening. And you just keep working it, and you'll feel the timber will just soak it in so quickly. And just make sure you really give it, put a bit of effort into rubbing this in, because you want the waxes and oils that are in the Dingotone to really penetrate into the timber to start forming a hard layer as it dries. So when you're satisfied with the depth of colour that you've got, and I've gone over this about 3 times in the one session, just go wipe it off with the grain just to level out any sort of high spots or wet spots that might be there. Now if you think you want to go even darker, you can, after it's cured, you can go over it again with a stain coat. It will still penetrate in and pick up and really intensify the colour even more.
That looks pretty good, DB. So that's the stain coat, and as you say, if you want to make that darker, you can go through again after your 2 to 3 days drying. But I'd be pretty happy with that. So the next stage is the intensifying coat. So let's grab the one that we've prepared earlier, and we'll have a look at how we apply the intensifying coat.
Sure.
So DB, we've seen how the first stain coat is applied, and we've got another body here which looks like it's an ES2V, again with the maple, it's almost quilted rather than flamed.
That is a quilt top.
It's like a quilted veneer on the ES2V. And you've gone with Coolangatta Gold?
That's correct.
All right, so that's the stain coat, and I see you've got the intensifying coat. So how do we go about it? Is it the same process, or is there anything different?
There is slight difference in the process with the intensifying coat in that you don't apply it in a circular motion. You actually just wipe with the grain. So again, you get your handy yogurt pot, give it a bit of a shake. This time you won't need to pour out quite as much, because it's vitally important that you apply these coats very thinly. You don't want to go slapping it on, because if you do, it'll take it way too long to dry and it just becomes a hassle basically. So in this case I just again load the cloth up, give it a squeeze to remove any real excess. And I should note too that there's no real need to steel wool between the stain coat and the intensifying coat. Just have a look at it, and if you see any sort of ridges or whatever, give it a little light rub with the the 4-0 steel wool. Then to apply, as you can see there's not a lot on there. You just wipe it with the grain. And you'll see that there'll be a slight colour change, and that's how you know where you've been. Don't panic if you've missed a few spots, you'll pick it up with the subsequent coats. The other trick is not to overwork it, just smooth it on nicely.
Well, Dingobass, that looks absolutely amazing. The colours really come out, and really, as it says, it's really intensified the colour. So that's the intensifying coat, and again we're going to let that dry for 2 to 3 days, is that right?
Yes, and that's why it's really important to make sure your coat is very, very thin. I can't stress that enough. The thinner the coat, the better, really.
Can you do multiple intensifying coats? Is that?
Oh yes, I mean, you can use the whole bottle if you want.
Right.
I mean, as long as you've applied it thinly, by the time you've done, it's still going to be a very thin finish that you've actually applied to the guitar, and that's really what you want. Thin is better than thick.
All right. So, allow that to dry for 2 to 3 days, then we're looking at the final coat. So, have we got another one here we can bring out and we'll see how we do the final coat?
Yes.